everyone, and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, we are going to be enjoying the fruits of my labor that I've been working on for the last couple months. I decided that I'm going to listen to every single queer YA audiobook that my library has to offer, and this hopefully will end up becoming a rather encompassing list of all of the queer YA books that are out there. There's so many of these that I'm probably going to do a part 2 and probably eventually a part 3, so this isn't super overwhelming right out the gate. If you're wondering why I did this, basically, I only read queer YA as like my non-school fun reading growing up, and this genre has only exploded in recent years since I was a teenager. Also, overall, I just prefer books with queer main characters. I myself am a lesbian and I'm marrying a woman, and all of my friend group are queer people of a variety of identities. And yeah, I just prefer queer stories and find reading books about queer people that are different from me as a good way to kind of learn and understand more about their experience. So I just wanted to kind of comb through the YA subgenre and see what I could find. As I talk about these, I'm going to just kind of go over some of my general thoughts and what my final takeaways are. And I'm also going to add chapter sections for spoilers if you want to skip over that and go to the next book instead. I'm also going to talk about these in terms of popularity in the number of Goodreads reviews. But yeah, with that intro out of the way, let's get into the video. Starting off, we have the most popular book on this list, which is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. This book has 380,000 Goodreads reviews and a 4.34 average. I ended up reading this book 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. This book is about Aristotle and Dante, who are two boys in their junior year of high school who end up meeting during the summer and sparking a friendship. And it just kind of follows them over the course of the next year as they are living apart from each other and just their experiences, learning more about themselves and their identity and their relationship to one another. This book is really funny. I definitely laughed out loud way more times in this book than I did with any others on this list. And the humor really comes from the writing style and with Dante as a character. Another thing I really enjoyed with this book is how all of the characters really feel like real people. Ari and Dante feel like real people, their whole family feels like real people, all of Ari's friends that we meet feel very real. Given that I was never a teenage boy, I found it like really refreshing to read from this lens of a teenage boy and just kind of go through his daily life. Maybe this point wouldn't be so fascinating if you were a teenage boy reading this yourself, but for me it was. Also, a quick comment about the audiobook because it's narrated by Lin-Manuel Miranda, and I did not know that going in. Which is extra funny because at one point Ari is thinking, I don't want to learn about Alexander Hamilton. And I was like, the layers of meta in here is just too funny. I do want to talk about this because I went, oh, I really love this book. I can't wait to see what the sequel is like. So then I went onto the sequel's Goodreads page and people were absolutely trashing it. They said that the writing is not nearly as good as the first one, and they also said there's a lot of transphobic and like general queer-phobic parts of the book that aren't kind of like explained or have like any real purpose, and it's just not really something I really want to deal with. I am fine pretending this book is a standalone like it has been for the last 6 years before the sequel came out. Overall, I didn't really like this first book, and I'm very excited to see what the movie adaptation is like when it comes out. The next book we are going to be talking about is They Both Die at the End. This book has 290,000 Goodreads reviews and a 4.01 average. And I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars. This book is set in a world where there is a mysterious company that will call you 24 hours before you are supposed to die. And this story follows two boys, Rufus and Mateo, who both get the call and then use an app to connect with other people like them who are supposed to be dying in the next day. And it just kind of follows their really rapid fire friendship and this one magical day they go on as like a last hurrah. I was surprised by how much I liked this book, and I can tell you probably the exact moment it happened. It was pretty late in the game, probably at like the 70% mark. I really liked all the vignettes of all the side characters, the other characters who are and aren't dying the same day as the main duo, and how they're just going about living their lives in a world where death is such an accepted part of life. I think this book is also a really good length. It feels just like the right amount of material for a full 24 hours, and all the timelines interweaving with the side characters and the eventual climax fit together really well. This book really did make me think both about death in both a sad and hopeful way. I really did feel encouraged, and it does sound really cheesy, but glow out and live my life like it's my last day. And I think we have the privilege of, not knowing what day our last day will be, so we can't have those regrets and fears that Mateo has at the start of the book. Overall, this book is definitely one I think I'll be recommending to people who are interested in this genre. There's just a lot in this book that I feel goes below the surface level, and it's really well presented. Talking about spoilers now, I really like that we don't know how Rufus dies in the end, even though I think it's probably implied that Victor hit him with his car when he was recklessly driving to the park. I didn't cry at this book, but when I kind of had the realization that this is how Rufus was going to die, I did like audibly gasp and clutch at my chest. If I could change one thing, I definitely would have put the romance a little earlier on, because you definitely see that they're connecting, but it's never like in a romantic way until Matteo takes the initiative to show his affections. I feel like even more overtly questioning about what the other's intentions are supposed to be going in, it would have like set up the romance in the reader's head earlier on. And this is kind of niche, but I kind of wish they did have like a sexual encounter in the end. I know it's not like the end all be all of a relationship, but I feel like the scene in Matteo's bedroom was a perfect place for that to be put. And a big kind of overarching theme of the book was Matteo going out and trying all the things he was scared to do beforehand. So I think him finally having the romantic moment with Rufus would have been really good. The next book we're going to be talking about is Cemetery Boys. Jumping down in popularity, this has 42,000 Goodreads reviews and it has a 4.36 average, and I rated this book 4 stars. This book is definitely not a full contemporary. I definitely would put it in the more magical realism category. Like, it's definitely our world, but there also is magic. It is about a boy named Yadiel who wants to be accepted as a brujo in his community. In this world, there's kind of like male-aligned magic and female-aligned magic, and the main character, Yadiel, as a trans boy, has been cut off and forbidden from his family from practicing the male-aligned magic because they don't think he's capable of doing it. But he is determined to prove them wrong and show them that he's just as capable as the other men in his family. In this world, the community takes care of the recently deceased spirits, and Yadiel ends up running into the spirit of a boy at his school named Julian. Julian is trying to find the culprit of the person who murdered him, and Yadiel agrees to help him go about on this quest if, in return, at the end, Yadiel is allowed to release Julian's spirit to kind of prove to the community that he has the same magical powers as everyone else. Of course, at the same time, they also are developing a relationship with each other, and Yadiel isn't really sure if he wants to help Julian's spirit pass on in the end. And there's also kind of like an underlying plot and sort of like more nefarious things that are going on that could be connected to Julian's murder. This book, again, took me a little while to get into, probably like the 70-75% minute mark. I was finally being like, okay, now this slaps. I really love Julian. I did think it was a little annoying at first, but he is a bad boy with a heart of gold, which is like the best kind of bad boy. He's really honest and usually makes super cutting observations, which is usually my favorite character trait, so I did eventually really like him. Overall, I really liked this book, and I thought the world building was really good. I like Yadiel and Julian as a couple and as separate characters as well. Talking about the spoiler section, if I could change one thing, it definitely would be that I feel like the villain kind of cheapened other parts of the story. Like the fact that Catrice was Yadiel's supporter, but only insofar that he cared about Yadiel and him both being outcasts, and that it wasn't the fact that he actually believed in Yadiel's transition really felt unfair. I also kind of don't know how I feel about the structure of the ending. It was a little anticlimactic. I would have loved Yadiel summoning Lady Death and then doing battle against Palal instead of her refusing to help. It kind of makes her seem untrustworthy, but then at the very end we're supposed to be really happy for Yadiel that he's allowed to help continue to serve her. If it was me, I would have Yadiel summon Lady Death, they have a fight with Palal, and somehow all of this uses up almost all of Yadiel's life, and then Julian can kind of will him back to life, and they can have kind of like a Raylo-style kiss at the end with an announcement of their love. However, the way it goes in the story, I really thought it was super cute that the first person that Julian reveals that he has feelings for with Yadiel is to Yadiel's dad, and not even Yadiel knows it at this point, and it's very, very cute. The next book we're going to be talking about is Felix Ever After. This has 41,000 Goodreads reviews and a 4.38 average. And I also rated this book 4 stars. This book follows Felix, who is a student at a prestigious New York art school. He has gone through his transition, has already had top surgery, and has just been living his life for a couple years. But then during a summer program, a bunch of photos are put up in the main school lobby of him pre-transition. And obviously Felix is really hurt by this and is determined to figure out who was the person that put these photos up. And he has a suspicion that it is his best friend's ex-boyfriend who basically cut them off when his best friend broke up with him. So he decides he's going to catfish this friend and see if he can get the truth out of him. But through this catfishing, he ends up really forming a bond with this other boy. The gallery also kind of throws Felix into a internal emotional turmoil because he already was dealing with some other issues involving questioning his identity. I think it would give someone who maybe is questioning their own identity kind of like a look into how queer people talk to each other and discuss their identity if you're just coming into the community. Overall, I really liked this book. It wasn't like an intense love, but I definitely see its value. I definitely would recommend it, especially if, like I said before, you're someone who's questioning your identity at all. I think we tend to talk about transphobia in like the general zeitgeist as being only through the TERF angle, so much so that we can ignore that it often can come from members of our own community. And I think the perspective of trans gay men in general is extra ignored in the mainstream dialogue. I also kind of think that Felix made the wrong choice. It seemed like his bond with Declan was way more romantic than his bond with Ezra ever was. Also, although I will say the ending confession scene at the gay pride parade, it was just so cute, I have to admit. next book I want to talk about is I Wish You All the Best. This has 26,000 Goodreads reviews and a 4.19 average. This book follows a main character named Ben. Ben has just come out as non-binary to their parents, and their parents do not take it well at all. They have like a huge freak out and end up kicking Ben out of the house. So Ben decides to reach out to their estranged older sister, who they haven't talked to in 10 years, and go live with them instead. They start a new school and get new friends, but they also have kind of like this background anxiety and depression that has been making adjusting to this new life more difficult. I think this book writes about anxiety and depression in a very understanding way. The way it talks about like the disjointedness between your thoughts and what you say, and the inability to compel yourself to say how you actually feel, and instead falling into this kind of loop of just saying, it's fine, I'm fine, everything's fine. It was just really interesting to read. Nathan, the love interest, was like a genuinely really sweet guy right off from the start, and I instantly liked him. But the more and more I read, I kind of was like, I don't see how he fell for Ben. I was like, do they really have anything in common? Besides Star Wars, which I will say, I don't know if it's like a basic threshold or like shorthand for old movie, but Red, White, and Royal Blue also references Star Wars, and I'm like, this is basic. Everyone likes Star Wars. This is a very basic interest. If you're going to have two characters bond over something, I would rather do it as like not a named franchise. Like it could have been that Nathan was really into outdoors and hiking, and he took Ben on a hike, and it was kind of like a trust exercise building their relationship. And then Ben like saw a view at the top of a mountain that was really beautiful, and they decided to paint it. And I just feel like it would help weave it into the story more. The scene with Star Wars basically just tells us maybe they're on a date, and maybe Nathan likes Ben as more than just friends. I feel like the story just didn't need a romance at all, and I would have preferred it if Ben had more bonding moments with other members of their friend group, and the story was more about being comfortable with yourself and the people who you choose as family. And we just have to accept that they're close because the, time jump of the epilogue tells us this. But I would have liked to have seen Ben open up in front of their friends. Overall, it was okay. I liked it. I just felt like it either could have been shorter or had some parts removed in favor of other scenes or more character development. The last book we're going to be talking about today is Darius the Great is Not Okay. This has 23,000 Goodreads reviews and a 4.28 average. And I rated this 5 stars. This book follows Darius. He's a very nerdy boy in high school, and he and his family are going to visit his mother's family in Iran for the very first time because his maternal grandfather has an illness, and this is probably the one chance he's going to be able to meet him while he's still alive. Darius meets a boy in Iran named Sarab, and that becomes his very first friendship. At the same time, Darius is dealing with other issues. He has a lot of body issues connected to his relationship with his father, and also has depression that no one seems to be able to understand. His father keeps making comments about his weight, and his extended family keeps wondering why he has depression when he has no reason to be sad. It's basically just like a character study into Darius being a young boy growing up and accepting himself as he goes through this life experience in a new country. This book is so funny. I just love the way Darius talks and how he uses code words to mean other things, and how so much of it is like nerd culture based, but also at the same time very understandable and digestible. You know how I just said don't put a name series in your story? I think it works well here because Star Trek is much more niche and nerdy, and it has a lot of plot relevant parts because it's used both to move the plot along and also as a metaphor, and helped kind of color Darius's overall personality. This book made me cry. There was a scene at like 90% through where I just did not expect to hit as hard as it did. I felt like this book, I could connect to it not only at like looking at myself as a teenager from Darius' perspective, but also seeing like what Darius' parents were going through and just how I would handle being a parent of a person like Darius. I think of all the books on this list, this is the one that I liked the most, and it's also the one that I want to own physically and read again and annotate. I just feel like it taught me something deeper that I want other people to read and see, and I definitely will be reading the sequel in a future video. One thing I will comment on is this book is definitely like the least overtly queer. I don't think it's outwardly said that Darius identifies as gay or bisexual. It's just kind of like an underlying thing that whenever his extended family asks him like why doesn't he have a girlfriend, he kind of freezes up internally because he knows that he has no interest in having a girlfriend. But I do know that in the sequel he does have a boyfriend, and he's openly out, and it deals more with that part of his personality. So that's it for part 1 of my Reading Queer YA book video series. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what your thoughts on them were. Also, I still have a running list of books I want to talk about in future videos, but if you have a queer YA book rec that you'd like to give me, please let me know in the comments down below. But that is it for me. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!